Hey guys, today we're in the book of 1 Samuel chapter 1. Now my voice sounds like this because I'm sick, but we'll make it through it. But I want to say a couple things before we start this chapter. If you still have the original reading plan from January that we passed out here at Green Acres, it says that we should be reading 2 chapters of Ruth and of 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel until the end of the year. Several people got a hold of me and said, hey, 2 chapters is a lot. So I decided to do 1 chapter. So we're going to finish the year of reading all the way through 1 Samuel. And we'll pick up on January 1 with 2 Samuel chapter 1. But in order to make that happen, you've got to read 5 extra chapters somewhere before the end of the year, okay? And so if we just read like we would, you would actually end up 5 chapters short before the end of 1 Samuel 1. So I will post extra videos as the days and weeks go on. Just know by December 31st, you should have read all of 1 Samuel. We will start January 1 with 2 Samuel chapter 1. Hope that makes sense. As we get into 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel in the Hebrew Bible is one book. It was only split when they translated the Hebrew Bible into the Greek Bible. And so we're not sure of necessarily who wrote the book 1 Samuel. Though Samuel is a part of it, most of this book happens after the death of Samuel. So somebody else wrote it. We're not sure, but it's named after the prophet Samuel, the namesake that we will read about today. In the book of 1 Samuel, there's 3 people that you really need to know, and it kind of gives us the order of the book. There's going to be the guy Samuel, a prophet of God, Saul, the first king of Israel, and David, which will be the second king of, will become the second king of Israel. So you have the first 7 chapters are about Samuel. You have chapters 8 through 15 is about the rise of King Saul. And then you have chapters 16 through 31 about the rise of David. Though King Saul is still king, we will see the rise of David that will take place, and we will see David become king in the book of 2 Samuel. Now, before we get into this, remember what we have read before this, right? So, the time of Judges, right, is where Israel would do whatever it wanted. It says there was no king in their days. They weren't looking to any leader. God raised several judges up to lead them for a time, for a period. But now we come to the book of 1 Samuel. And in 1 Samuel, this is where Israel will get their first king. Now, we won't see this for about a week or two, but you can see coming off the end of Judges, setting the scene for this new king. So we start in chapter 1, and chapter 1 is kind of a little, almost a love story, if you will, to tell us where we get Samuel at. Notice the very verse, it says that there was a certain man. God was going to use a certain man. Much like God always does, he chooses and he uses who he wants. And this certain man, his name is Elkanah. Elkanah. And Elkanah, he has 2 wives. He has Hannah and he has Peninnah. In the Hebrew, her name is Hannah, is the name Hanukkah, right? So Canonica. This is the word that we get Hanukkah, right? And so H starts with a ch sound, so Kana, and then you have Purana. Now, we're just going to call them Hannah, okay, how we would pronounce it in English, but I wanted you to know that. This man has 2 wives. Hannah, she is barren. She has no children. And then you have Peninnah, which is has multiple children. We see that this man Elkanah is a holy man. He is a godly man, that he travels once a year to Shiloh. Remember, Shiloh is the place of the tabernacle, and he goes there to sacrifice. Not only does he go, but he takes his whole family, both wives and the children. He takes all of them to go. And he goes, and we see that when he sacrifices, he gives the leftover sacrifice to his wife and their kids, but he gives a double portion to Hannah. This shows that even though she is barren, even though she does not have children, that he truly does love her. He gives her a double portion. And we see that the Lord had closed her womb. We don't know this. She doesn't know this. She doesn't know why she doesn't have children, but we're getting a little detail to the story. But you can imagine during this time that this other woman, this other wife, the second wife, is making fun of her, right? For a woman to have a child or to have children is everything. And so during this time, as they travel, even though Elkanah is loving her and giving her double portion, she is not able to receive this. And to be thankful for this, because Peninnah is making fun of her and is provoking against her. And so what happens? She is weeping, she is crying out, even so much that her husband Elkanah says, "Am I not enough for you?" And it shows the heart of the husband, but in the reality, it also shows the insincerity of her husband, of saying, that there's a want in his wife's heart that he cannot fulfill. So instead of being mad, instead of being angry, what does she do? She goes to the temple and she prays. It says that she weeps bitterly and she prays to the Lord. And she vows, she makes an oath, "Lord, if you will give me a son, I will give him back to you. You will be able to use, be able to use him, and I will keep him in a Nazirite vow," right where it says in verse 11, "No razor shall touch his head." The same as Samson, the same as some others that we've seen thus far. She continued to pray, and the priest, Eli, was seeing her, but she was praying, but she wasn't praying out loud. He just saw her mouth moving, and he mistakenly thought she was drunk. And she corrects him and says, "I'm not drunk, but I am praying because I really want this. I'm pouring out my heart to the Lord." And Eli says, "Go in peace, and God of Israel will grant your petition." Now, what's interesting about this statement is we don't know if God told Eli to say this, or if Eli was just being a good priest and saying, "Hey, you've prayed for it. The Lord will give you the desires of your heart. Keep praying and move on." But nevertheless, God answered that prayer. And what's interesting in verse 18, it says that the woman went away and her face was no longer sad. He said this, and she by faith believed him, and by faith counted it as a blessing. And so it just really shows us the faith of Hannah that she had, even so much so that the next day that she arose early in the morning and worshiped before the Lord, worshiping before she'd received the miracle. She's already blessing the Lord for what he's going to give her in the future. In verse 20, it says, "In the due time." It means that not immediately, but as time progressed, Hannah became pregnant, and she had a son, and she named him Samuel. Samuel. That name, it means the name of God. But what's interesting is the word asked, to ask God, to ask in Hebrew is the same word, or sounds like the same word as Samuel in Hebrew. So it's a play on words. It's the name of God, Samuel, but it also means ask. I've asked God. It's a play on the name, saying I asked God for a son, and he gave me it, right? So ask, name of God, but his name is Samuel. And so she became pregnant, and she had Samuel, and now Elkanah is going back to the temple like he does every year. And she said, it's not time for me. The baby is young. We will stay here until he is weaned. And when he is weaned, we will go. Now in Hebrew culture, most babies were around 2, maybe 3 years old. And so she stayed home for 2 or 3 years, but eventually she takes them to the Lord, to the temple, to Shiloh, to do exactly as she said, and to bless God. They take a 3-year-old bull. They slaughter the bull, which means they sacrifice the bull, thanking God for giving them Samuel. And for this child I prayed, the Lord granted me the petition that I made. Therefore I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he lived, he is lent to the Lord. Now, when we read that in the English, we read the word lent as if it's not God. She's just lending Samuel to the Lord. And that's not what that word means in the Hebrew context. The word lent means fulfilled. So it means that the Lord fulfilled his promise to me. He fulfilled my prayer, and so the Lord can use him as he wants, right? So it's not like, hey, I'll lend him and I want him back. It's kind of the idea of saying, here he is, Lord, use him how you want. If you want him all the time, you want him a few, whenever you want him, he's yours. And so that's really what that phrase means there, that she lent him to the Lord. He was available to the Lord at any time. What's interesting about chapter 1 as we read it is we see through the life of Hannah how we really should be. When she is fearful, when she is in anguish, when she has been made fun of, when she is sad, when she is down, what happens? She doesn't get mad. She doesn't get angry. She cries out to the Lord. She goes to the temple and she cries out constantly, continually to prayer is what it says, that she continued to pray. And that's exactly what we should do, that we should cry out to the Lord of all of our woes, of all of our conditions, because we have Jesus Christ sitting at the right hand of the Father, interceding for us daily to the Father. So when we have problems, we should be like Hannah, and we should cry out to the Lord so that the Lord can hear those and that he may answer them if it is his will. Hope that makes a little bit more sense, and we will see you tomorrow in chapter 2. God bless.